some general babble before we get started on the specifics for today. I plan on eventually doing an intro video to the series, but I thought it'd be better to do a couple episodes and get a feel for what it is before I start saying what it's going to be. I don't know, just feel it out. But the idea is, if you take it back 2 years now, I was pretty much just out of the service, and I had more time on my hands than I was used to. And I was used to working on things that meant something to me with people regularly. And that all went away when I stopped having someone to work with regularly. And I was just doing like solo learning, like study and such, which is just a totally different experience. And it's not nearly as validating because you don't feel like you ever accomplished anything. It's just a grind, blah blah blah. So I felt myself attracted to Vermintide because it's like such a cooperative experience where you're working with people. It's very social compared to every other game I've played. It really inspires people to like make lasting bonds, which was awesome. I missed that. And the last thing is, I get like a really awesome sense of accomplishment from Vermintide, from taking it seriously and doing well with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, plus I've loved the lore for Warhammer
Hold on.
since the 80s.
We got double. Hold on. No problem. I'll just meet you in game. All right, continue. All right, I shut you off in game so you can say whatever you want. You're not gonna double cast anymore. All right. Well, while he's fixing that, but what happened though is I was raised in a household where video games were a waste of time that were to be barely stomached. Does that make sense? Like, they never let me have my own gaming systems, really. They never let me have my own PC or PC time, blah, blah, blah. And I inherited a lot of that, even though I really was attracted to games and really attracted and wanted to be good. I never really had the opportunity other than going to friends' houses on weekends and staying over, etc. So I always had like this residual feeling like it was an illegitimate activity. So it was hard for me to take seriously, even though at the same time I was taking it seriously, and I was kind of two minds about it. But somewhere in the last year or so, I decided to let go of that and just accept the fact that it is a hobby, but it's something I really enjoy taking seriously. And since I've done that and started accepting to myself that playing Vermintide seriously is a good thing for me, even though it means I'm not doing other things, it's something I choose to do. It's been a really rewarding experience in a lot of ways. And I want to talk about those ways, but I guess the general impetus for having these talks is I feel like if we have a really, really smart group of people that play Vermintide, and really mature people too. And I've noticed that when I take it seriously and I let myself take it seriously and start analyzing it, yada yada. This is also my personality, but I enjoy it even more and I get more out of it, not just in Vermintide, but in life too. So the idea of serious play, which is going to be the name of the series, is we'll look at different aspects of it, of gaming, of Vermintide in particular, and trying to analyze it and figure out how it works a little bit and how it relates back to us, and from that maybe have some conclusions of how we can do better with it or get better at life because of it. Does that make sense? Have I been babbling to myself the whole time? I probably babbled to myself and I probably hit mute. My guess is I hit mute. Yeah, I hit mute. That was my guess. Okay, well that means I get to make my own completely introduction. No one had to hear it on your end. That's my bad. Did Malachar add you guys yet?
No, Jesset, can you please add me instead, because I have troubles with Steam. I've sent you a link to my profile.
Okay.
At least I hope that this is my profile.
Okay. Discussion.
I'm a Steam noob.
Jesus, I don't know how to use this. Where do I put?
Or maybe, I don't know, maybe search me by my name.
Here,
And
no,
I have,
got it. Got it.
I have a
Add
pin
friend.
avatar.
I really thought I had you from when we were doing the Vermin
No,
Guide.
I don't think we've played together.
Did it work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
So, before we start on this also, when you're joining, I think everybody here knows Crindy, and everybody here knows Sneaky Panda. Does everyone here know Malachar? Malachar, do you want to say a little bit about yourself? I know you've been playing this game forever, too.
Well, I think I know the other guys by Reddit, but we've never met in game, because I don't ever play with North Americans. I'm bad as it is with normal ping, and I'm totally awful when I'm lagging. So
But
well, I don't know. I don't know what there is to say. I'm just a regular. I don't know. No life, high hour count, low talent player type.
Oh.
Yeah.
But you started when? When did you start?
When the game just released, or actually, I've started when during the 2-week pre-order early access, I think.
So it was December 15, I think.
Yeah, it was October or November 15,
Oh yeah. Okay.
something like that.
And you've been following it since basically development then.
Yeah.
And playing pretty consistently since. And I'm sure you did Kata Banner
Well,
that year.
well, I took. Yeah, I got Kata Banner pretty early. I mean, I think I was level 50 when I started Kata. There was no Kata lobbies, no public Kata lobbies at all at that point.
Sure.
And I got my Kata banner when I was maybe level 80 or something.
Right. So I know you're saying no life, no talent, or whatever you were saying with that, but obviously that's not the case, right? So
well, that's maybe a little exaggeration, but that's at least partly true.
I guess what I'm saying is,
I'm a
at
decent
minimum,
player, but I'm not very talented. I just play a lot, and
but at minimum, you were doing Kata when the Kata was new, which means one, you're pretty good at picking up new things. You know how to explore and pick up things. Two, and probably almost most importantly, you know how to make relationships and make them work.
And three, you use a mic.
And three, you use a mic. That's like a necessity to do anything, in my opinion, in this game. So, you know, the new with much experience Malakar. But on the other hand, we all know you from reputation from all of your posts in Reddit for the last 2 years, right? So anytime you see Malakar saying something, it's almost always reasoned and respectful. So
yeah, I try to not be impulsive when I post, but I actually when I'm playing I can get pretty excited, shout at my teammates, like well, like lots of people do. Just that I only seem reasonable because I think a lot about my posts when I'm posting.
Unlike other leading members of the community. Let me just shoot an arrow in this direction. Somebody really needs to post that on Reddit. Okay. So we'll hang out with our cool backdrop. So what I wanted to talk about today is why people play. So in general, motivation, and I think the inspiration from this comes from a really old article by Mark Rosewater. If any of you are familiar with Magic, you know that name. Right? So he's been the lead designer in Magic for like 20 years now or something crazy like that. He was a pro or semi-pro before that, but he's been in development there for forever. And one of the things that he kind of spearheaded there was trying to look at people who play Magic and try to suss out what their inspiration for play is, right? Like, why do they play? And eventually they came up with different... The word they use, the technical term, is psychographics. It comes from marketing. But the general idea is to kind of typecast people a little bit. It's not to be too much, like not try to stereotype too much, but and to kind of group them into different general reasons or motivations or whys. Not how they play, not what they play, but why they play. Does that make sense?
Yeah, where their satisfaction derives from.
Yes, exactly. And you can try to suss out what it is by looking at what they do, but what they do is not the why in and of itself. And the other thing that kind of ended up being interesting about that is when a lot of people will look at that and say, okay, well, obviously the people who play for many hours and play for a long time and have been playing Magic for years, oh, those guys must all be hardcore guys, right? They must be all... The term that comes from Magic is spike, and I'll introduce these terms, and then so we all have a common language, and then we can chat, and I'll shut up for a while and let you guys talk. But so the idea basically, that terminology, the hardcore person, the person who gets his motivation from winning, they call a spike, right? And it's from being really good at something. So you could be a spike for being winning, like being a winning person, dominating and winning, but you could also be like a nerd spike, right? Like someone who gets off because they know the rules better than the interactions better than anyone else. Does that make sense? So we have mechanics nerds and mechanics spikes in Vermintide for sure that really get off on being the one person who knows everything. Did I mute myself again?
No, you're good.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I read the article you linked, but I don't think it's very applicable to Vermintide because it's a totally different game. It's real time and it's reaction based, while
Yes.
Magic is
Yes.
totally intellectual.
Yes. So there's going to be some parallels, but there's going to be a lot that's different because that's just exclusively a game. And I think of video games as a hybrid between a game and a sport. Okay, but hold off on that for 1 second. So let me very loosely introduce the other two. So the next one, the most obvious one maybe, or second most obvious one, is Timmy. So the stereotype for Timmy is they like playing big things, right? Like playing big creatures, blah, 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 blah. But that's like a really reducing stereotype. It's more like they play to have fun. So whereas with a Spike player, the correct move is the move that leads most likely to winning, right? For a Timmy, that's not necessarily the case. It could be the one that leads to a more...
The correct move is the most exciting move.
Yes, they're looking for excitement. That's exactly right. And it could be a lot of things. You can get off in different ways, right? You could be a social Timmy, and you like it because there's a social aspect. And there's definitely players like that in Vermintide. And another quick note is it's not trying to find that you're just one thing. It's looking for aspects of these things that you identify with. But okay, and the third kind is called a Johnny. So Johnny likes, I think the best word we could use from the Vermintide community is hipster, right? Like they like to be ahead of the curve. They like to come up with new things and make it work. They like to be the one person who figures out something new. Does that make sense? And make something new work. Like they're trying to express themselves. If you were to try to reduce it to a singular term. So in Vermintide, that might be like you're the one guy who makes dual daggers work, right? And I don't know anyone in this room who might be described in this way. Where's Crindy? There he is. So Crindy's a hipster. Crindy's a hipster, and I kind of think of him as a Johnny in that way. But okay. So obviously the parallels to Vermintide are not perfect, and trying to wholesale take the terminology, yada yada. But I thought it would be a good way to kickstart the conversation. And what do you guys want to do next? Talk about your own motivation a little bit, and then we'll chat about generalities.
Sure.
So go ahead, Grandy.
Well, I usually play every morning before work, so part of my motivation is just waking up. But one of my buddies from the East Coast plays every morning, so part of that ends up being social interaction since I work from home, and it's just me and my wife all day, and anybody else is just instant messaging. So some of it's interactions, some of it's just chilling out and killing rats. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been a huge fan of the Warhammer world setting since the late 80s, so some of it is just getting to hang out in the world. And then there's the explorer achiever type stuff of finding different ways to accomplish things, finding those good players from the, every time the game goes on sale for $5 or something, there's a huge glut of bad players, but there's a few good ones in the mix there that, they're in their 20s, but they're able to hang out in Nightmare or make the jump to Kata. They use a mic, they actually communicate, and finding those is satisfying.
And doing what with it? Playing with them, teaching?
Yeah, teaching them, adding them in their friends list to collect a larger community of competent people to play with. I think that's probably how I met most of the friends list was just from adding people that were competent from random pubbing.
So that's what you do. Any notion as to why the teaching part's fun or motivating in some way?
It satisfies for work purposes, I hate training new people, but I absolutely love being an expert resource for obscure knowledge. And so I'm sure it satisfies some aspect of that for when people come to me to talk about game mechanics and things like that. And I like figuring out how things work and being able to analyze them from a logical and analytical perspective.
But it's funny that you say that you don't like doing it for work. What do you think the distinction is?
Well, I'm not doing. It's this. It would be more the equivalent of if I was teaching somebody how to do the very basic stuff. Like, okay, so this is a first person game, so no, I hate that stuff. But if someone is
Ah.
somewhat competent and has some potential, being able to take that potential and improve upon it is satisfying to me.
So, to take an analogy to everyday classes, you'd hate teaching Physics 101, but you like to be someone who talks with promising PhD candidates on specific topics, like that's in your area of expertise, right?
Yeah,
So they
that'd
already
be a
know
good
all the
good for
basics, but
me.
you want to talk to them about some specific area of plasma physics that you have personal specific knowledge in.
Yeah, yeah, that's probably a good analogy.
Interesting. Okay, and I get the lore thing, and I think we could talk more about that later. Panda, you want to share?
Hi, my name is Sneaky Panda, and I like to kill rats.
That's a good start.
In a nutshell.
Why?
So I played like a lot of competitive first-person shooters when I was in my teens, Quake, Reflex, Tribes, all that sort of stuff. And I played a game called Chivalry Medieval Warfare, which is
Good game.
it has really, really um, complex melee combat. It's very deep, right? There's the high skill ceiling and obscure mechanics where you can attack with your weapon while it's uh like going like you're doing an overhead. You can like swing twice. It's called rainbowing. There's all these silly like obscure mechanics, sort of like there are in Vermintide. The melee combat's not as complex, I would say, but I was convinced to purchase this game by some friends on the grounds that it was like Chivalry, and I was actually kind of hesitant to buy it, but eventually I did, and I stuck around for a lot of the same reasons that I stuck around in Chivalry for so long, and that's the the mechanics. There's a lot of them, and they I don't
Is
know,
it
they're very replayable.
how much of it has to be relative to someone else versus knowing your own head that you just did something cool? Because it sounds like one of the things that really motivating to you is knowing that you know how to pull something off that's a pretty high like skill floor, right? You need to be pretty darn good to pull what you just pulled off and pulling it off. Awareness of your own goodness in the moment. Does that make
You
sense?
look ridiculous. Stop
So
jumping.
how
I guess
much of that?
what was the question? How much? What is the
How much of
distinction
it?
between?
How much of it needs to be relative to other people, or is it relative to like, I don't know, your own standards?
I've played like solo games. I don't really care how much it compares to other people. I mean, it's kind of, rewarding, I guess, to, like other things that I've done. That they're often categorize you on percentiles, and even just like type racer, just like typing on your keyboard, it'll be like you're in the top 1% or whatever, and that is, a motivation in some sense, right? Because this game doesn't have that, or doesn't
Yeah.
really satisfy
There's
that. 'cause
no
there's
leaderboard.
no leaderboard or anything like that. But I guess like a different game I played at like a mod for Quake. This is called Defrag, where all you do is
Yeah.
just run around and you got to get from A to B as quickly as possible. You're not racing the other people. There are other people, but you're really just racing to your own like, ghost. You're just trying to set PBs. So for me, it's more just comparing to myself, I guess. I just want to improve relative to my own play. But I mean, like meeting you and Grimalact has helped, accelerate me as a player mechanically, since you guys know all this obscure stuff, right? When I first met you, I didn't even know about how to dodge kite properly, and I was a speedrunner. So that was like a really helpful piece of advice. But I would say it's more about personal improvement than like comparison to other people, at least in this game.
So it's kind of interesting. Is if I were to describe things that I like, they'd be pretty similar to what you're saying, but you play a lot more casually than I do. I don't mean you play casually when you play. I mean you play things that are considered to be more casual, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah, I kind of inhabit both worlds, I guess.
I'm wondering why.
I don't know. I guess I can just play casually and have fun with that still.
So the social.
I
is it the
drink a lot
social
more than you.
aspect? Is it the social aspect? Like you enjoy like the bullshitting?
I mean, yeah, definitely. Yeah. There's certainly fun in socializing. I feel like I tend to brighten up a lot of lobbies, just by being in them. I don't know.
You know what's
I'm goofy.
you know what's different with pub, especially or like mixed ability groups, is versus like just true soloing all day every day is I'm getting to the point where I've reduced everything down, right? I can predict almost everything. When you play with other people, there's a lot more randomness.
Oh yeah.
Do you like the randomness when things go crazy?
Yeah, it makes things interesting, and that's why pubbing is fun, because there is no limit to what they can do, what kind of decisions they can make, and it makes for some sort of hectic experience. It's kind of a different type of difficulty. It's
Yeah.
not a difficulty associated with the map or the mission or the objective.
It's almost like the
uh,
difference between a duel and a free for all in Quake, or even a duel in team deathmatch, right?
different kind of spiciness.
With
Yeah.
duel, the other guy is
Trying to-
exceptional. But go ahead, Grinny.
I was going to say, it changes the difficulty because you've got the difficulty of potentially hard carrying somebody that doesn't do basic things like block, and you're trying to keep them alive and still progress through the map.
Or like you, Jay, if you can predict everything that'll happen with the rats, but you can't predict what the people are going to do. It adds a different, unpredictability to it. That's really what makes it replayable, is that it's not predictable, and the lobbies will all play differently. Occasionally, you'll run into three stacks who have a very specific style of play that might be entirely antagonistic to your own philosophies.
Crindy, Entel,
know.
Poison, Cough.
Yeah, like
I don't know what
you've
you
got-
mean.
I mean, the way you
The-
guys play is very specific to the three of you.
Yeah, well, Poison hasn't really been playing lately, so
He'll
it's mostly
come
just
back.
been me and Enel. But yeah, he'll come back.
like a different lobby as well. I don't know where they went, but if you recall, B Fire,
They're
and
playing
that
Warframe.
crew
They're playing Warframe.
who were doing Death Wish live streams.
Yep.
They have their own very specific playstyle as well, and also their own, like, if they're on the comms, which is rare in a public lobby. A 3-stack would be in Discord with one another, right? But still, when you do see that on rare occasions, their comms are very specific too. They have their own terminology. Like you seemingly have your own language, right? Like when you call out stuff.
For sure.
So it's yeah, that's replayability in my eyes.
It's interesting, right? Okay.
Yeah,
Now-
and that language evolves over time because you'll say something that could be ambiguous, and it causes a problem, and then you discuss on what you're going to replace the term with, because you
Right.
want a good term that's clear, unambiguous, and preferably as few syllables as possible in order to communicate clearly to everybody in the shortest time frame.
But it's not just the word, right? It's also the shared mental model.
Yeah.
The shared, I know that this is the impetus, like this is the situation, and I know this is kind of the plan. And this is what the plan could look like. And therefore, if someone calls it, it actually means something to you. The word only can convey so much.
I love crazy comms. That's probably my favorite part of Overwatch, apart from the salt and
Really?
the frustration. Is just the extremely busy comms. It's just like when you're in a high level 6-stack trying to play competitively, the comms are really fun.
So you like it, but
very
when,
interesting.
when it's the same 6-stack over and over and over? Or when the 6-stack is somewhat core but has some rotation, so there's some variability?
I like the fixed 6-stack because
Yeah, there's an
Um,
evolved language.
when I ran a competitive Overwatch team, right, there were times where we spent several hours, like say we're on this map here, we'd be like, all right, so point one, what's our comp, what's our strategy, what strategies do we have, I want you here, I want him here, what if they do this, and we'd like literally go through every single map in the game and come up with strats for every single
Sure.
map and point, and with different rosters, and then you can accomplish more that way.
But that's rather different than crazy comms in pubs. There might be a lot going on, but the things that are being said are laden
Yeah.
with shared meaning.
Yeah, no, this is a different kind of
That's like high-level team execution, which is
Yeah,
really
yeah.
cool.
yeah, it's really cool. And when everybody's just like, just yelling into the mic. Zarya no bubble, Genji no deflect. Blah, 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 blah. I love that. It's really fun.
All right, Malakar. So we're least familiar with you, so you're gonna have to talk the longest.
Yeah, okay. So what Grinda said resonated a lot with me. So I guess I'm somewhat similar in that regard. I'm not really a social person. I'm quite the opposite, but I do a lot of socializing in Vermintide. I also work from home, so Vermintide somewhat satisfies my uh, uh, needs for socializing. So I don't normally talk much, but when I start talking, I can't shut up. So what I wanted to add that I also play Warframe, and chronologically I started probably earlier than I started Vermintide. And while I made a lot of friends in Vermintide, I don't think I made even a single friend in Warframe, even though I added people in my friend list. It's just that Warframe seems to not encourage teamwork and not encourage, I don't know, playing with people all over again. While I don't know. Well,
So go ahead.
So I also have a long history as a World of Warcraft player. I think I played more than 10 years. And I've been playing in competitive PvE guilds. And I find the experience very similar to Vermintide because you need to constantly push your skills and you need to depend on your teammates. You also need good communication and stuff. And so I guess the transition to Vermintide was very natural for me.
So one of the interesting things to note real quick is Krindi, Malakar, again Pyromancer, aka Yapgotch Master, and when I was starting this, we're all at home, working from home. I was going to school, so it's kind of interesting that they're all adults, right? Who weren't getting as much social experience and socializing on a daily basis, working with teams and people one-on-one and in groups like you probably were used to before that. So Vermintide in some way is a unique in that you talk to so many people and they all say the same thing. I played dozens of games, and in a month of playing Vermintide, I have more people on my friends list than I have in 2 years of playing Battlefield, Call of Duty, Warframe, World of Warcraft, blah 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 blah.
Vermintide was the first game I added someone who I didn't already know in real life to a friends list.
And you hear the same story over and over and over. And I'd love to go back and find some people that played Left 4 Dead when Left 4 Dead was young and see if they had similar experiences.
Oh, well, you should chat with Ensel. You guys could be best buddies.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, he's got like 9,000 hours in Left 4 Dead too.
Oh
Interesting. He's a lifer, for sure. So Malakar, to keep talking about this though, so you have, you're level 1260, so you easily have 2,500 hours or so, right?
It's 2,300 at the moment. Yeah.
What do you do now?
I guess it's one of the. I don't. There's probably not many people with more hour count than me in the world, so I do play a lot, and most of those hours come from public kata groups. So I have a lot of friends I play with, but a lot of them get on breaks a lot. So as much as I love doing stuff like Deathwish and Stormvermin Mutation and other mods, I only do that when I have a full group of friends. And more often than not, there's too many. There's no one online, so I just hop into public groups. I just join.
So you solo queue? You join other people's groups alone.
Yeah, I either join other groups or I start my own when there is no other groups and play with bots until other people join. So I'm obviously very experienced with bots, and I also enjoy the randomness of public groups. I second to everything what Panda said. It's really exciting because you never know what they'll do, and you have to adapt and you have to make decisions on the fly, like whether you have to stick with this guy and protect him, or you have to maybe, I don't know, sacrifice him and well just revive him when he respawns or something, and maybe help other people more. And I also enjoy coaching people, even though I try to not give unsolicited advice. But when they ask me like about stuff, it's just I just love sharing my experience.
So what I think is interesting, and what I'm getting from you, and what I know from watching Sneaky when he plays in pubs, is you guys don't try to raid lead when you play with randoms.
Well, in my case, I try not to raid lead, but sometimes I ended up doing that because I played World of Warcraft a lot, and it takes its toll. It made its mark on me. So sometimes I just can't help myself. But yeah, I
Only
think
thing a raid lead
raid
is
leading is
failing.
not a good idea generally, unless people want you to and they're fine with it and they thank you for it. Uh, then it's okay to be a raid leader.
Yeah, there's usually no in between. People either appreciate a shot caller or they resent you for telling them how to play.
Exactly.
Yeah, so if they make it known that they don't like it, then it's best to shut up and don't try to do it again with
Yep.
them.
Hold on one sec.
Yeah, I used to shot call a lot in pubs, and yeah, oftentimes it is not appreciated.
So, I think. So when I first started, a lot of the reasons I was attracted to it is just I like melee, and the game's just fun, right? Like the two-handed hammer, just smashing with that thing was just fun from the very get-go. But obviously that wouldn't have kept me playing for all that long. You know, the novelty, just the sheer, the Timmy joy of swinging the big hammer or whatever to have you, or actually shooting a fireball instead of, you know, it feels like in Vermintide that you're casting the fireball as opposed to like a turn-based D&D thing telling your character to cast a fireball. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it's an action game. You're doing the action, much like with Quake. You're the one who's shooting the rocket, not telling your character to shoot a rocket. So that part's like fun and just fun for me personally. Oh no.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say that when I started playing Vermintide, what it was most impressed is that just felt real. I don't know how else to say it. Casting a fireball and hitting that red with a fireball felt exactly real, and I've never felt it in any other game since. So even when I started playing Dark Souls 3 after I got a lot of hours on Vermintide, all I thought was, wow, it's so artificial compared to Vermintide.
Yeah. So it felt like you're really in a high fantasy adventure with
I
a party.
remember this from my dreams.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's visceral. It's
You don't have to role play it. You are doing it. So
Another
that's
thing
go
that
ahead.
catches my mind about Vermintide is if I don't play for a few days because I'm busy with other stuff, even after like, say, 4 days of not playing, fire it up, and the first thing that comes to mind is, God damn, this is a good-looking game. Like, it feels so much more immersive to be in this game than most other games that I've played.
Even beautiful games like Witcher.
Yeah. I know,
which is
there's-
what I usually compare Vermintide to. I think it's these two games are on the same level in terms of technical execution. Maybe Witcher has fancy real-time weather effects going for it, but otherwise they're pretty similar. But that's the same level of realism, roughly.
So the lore and the feel of the game is just great. So that was definitely part of it. And I could talk for a while about the communication and team aspect of it being like good. And you all have all touched on that already. And that was a big draw for me too. But the other thing that was a big draw for me, and I think Sneaky was kind of suggesting the same thing, is Kata was hard.
Yeah.
And Kata was a goal.
And I think we're all on the not young side. I don't know. I'm in my early 40s. And finding a game that was not a everybody gets a medal cakewalk where there's no difficulty at the highest tier was remarkably refreshing.
Unlike most RPG-ish. So let's do this. Let's talk about this for a second. the lore, the high fantasy lore, tends to automatically be associated with RPG games. And I can't help but feel that most RPG games are not that hard once you get good at them. Does that make
Not
sense?
anymore.
RPG games are about making your character strong rather than
Than you getting strong.
acquiring the skills. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is definitely a mechanical game, like Quake or some of the other games that Panda was talking about. And the highest difficulty level is actually hard. Even when you're good, it's still punishing. The whole party can just wipe in seconds. So
Yeah, you get a bad chain of events, and that good game.
which is just really cool. It was really attractive to me to have something to want to work towards. It was extremely motivating. Like, I would go and I'd try and I'd find someone's kata run of Garden of Moor, and I would look for where they hold and why they hold there. And then I'd been accumulating groups of friends too, and then I don't know why I always tried to raid lead from the beginning. I'm just annoying that way, I guess. But I'd be, so we're going
It's
to go
your inner
here.
teacher coming out.
I don't know exactly what it is. Or it's because I'm a control freak who can't accept randomness. That may
Maybe.
be possible.
So you're saying when you were a newer player, you used reference material of other people playing and analyzed their positioning? So
From-
you're like, from day one, you were like analytical about the game.
From like level 30 or 40, yeah. So
Very interesting.
from like the first week of play.
Yeah, that probably
so
would
that's-
have made
that's
my life
definitely
a lot
a-
easier.
Yeah, the knowledge-seeking category there, which
And that's
which
not
fits
everyone.
in with the. No, but that fits in with the explorer archetype that we were talking about from Bartles.
Yeah. But it was like I didn't want to know every obscure thing. I wanted to master it. That's what it was. And the difference between this game and like Counter-Strike is you can always get better at Counter-Strike. There is no ceiling. And everyone else always gets better too. So I guess there is a lot of this same like get better, get better, get better. But in this game, it felt like you could set your sights on a particular goal and learn and get better mechanically and knowledge-wise until you could achieve that goal. And that was just really cool to me, that you could level up and have like this obvious indication that you in fact achieved your goal. And that was really motivating for me for a long time. And then I met other people and who were okay, and like mostly I ended up playing with really kind of fun guys because I guess they're the only ones who can take my hardcore side, ironically. So I don't know if you guys know Clever Gato, for example.
Name sounds kind of familiar.
He's been gone for a year because his computer died and had issues. But anyways, the point is just really good players, but also like pretty lighthearted and fun, which was necessary to counterbalance me being like a fucking Nazi. But and that was awesome until I felt like I'd done absolutely everything you could do with Kata. Like we just crushed Kata, absolutely crushed it. Win rates as high as we wanted them to be, right? And there was nothing left. Now, at that time, people started doing white runs, but it felt really cheesy to me to self-handicap. And Battleborn was coming out, and Battleborn looked really cool. And I kind of drifted for a while, and then I finally came
I'm
back.
so disappointed with that.
A lot of us went over to it. There was a lot of Vermintide players playing Battleborn when it came out. And I thought it was a great game. I really don't think it deserved the ending it did, but the developers did such a horrible... Let's not even go down that road.
Yeah,
They
that
did
can
all-
be another.
They didn't know what they wanted to do, and progression that lasted from game to game. Like, how stupid could that be with a competitive game? I can't believe it. Anyways, eventually I came back to Vermintide because I missed how cool it was, and for some reason I've said to myself, I'm going to see if we can... Let's put a new challenge. Let's beat Kata, let's beat the hell out of Kata, but let's do it fast. And ever since then, my goal has always been, let's master the next thing. And I know that's not everyone, but I find that to be extremely motivating, to have a particular goal and to figure out how to do it and then execute, which sounds remarkably similar if you listen to how Panda was explaining what he liked about high-level Overwatch pugs. Would you agree, Panda?
Yeah, more or less.
So, okay, we've all babbled about kind of personal experiences and such. We can also talk about other people on the playlists that we have. So tell me whose name comes to mind when I describe the following player. When they go past Nightmare, not so much. They have hundreds of hours in the game, but they mostly just run through. Their positioning and such never makes any sense to you, but they always seem to be having a good time anyways.
Are we calling people out by name? Because I
It's-
have a bunch of those on my friends list.
It's fine. You absolutely can. Because I think
Adagar.
Yep. No, Adagar is quite good for someone who does that. I'm not sure about.
Rockness.
I'm not sure about Duke. Duke's an interesting case. I don't think I understand him exactly.
Duke's a goofball.
And I
Duke literally throws, but he has a fun time when he does it.
and we can talk about.
He's the guy in the Last Stand run who will, do this crap to you. Damage the whole team unnecessarily for the lulz.
Ouch!
So. I think. Now that we've removed that. I don't even want to use the word. Okay. So we know people on our friends list that have obviously different motivations than us, because winning alone is not what they're after. Does that make sense? Like for none of our cases, winning itself is motivating entirely. It's specific kinds of winning, right? So none of us play Nightmare, for example, at this point,
I still do sometimes.
but only with the same certain type of people, right?
Yeah, or if, if I just got up and I'm still freaking tired, I'll
As a
start on
warm-up?
Nightmare. Yeah. Or if I'm gonna be, if it's 7:30 in the morning Pacific time, the player base is not all that. I might play a Nightmare game to see if I can collect a couple people that don't suck, and then
Because it's that or solo.
right.
But it's not like the goal state, right?
Nah.
But we know people that just literally play Nightmare.
Yeah, but the jump between, I think that goes back to some discussions that we've had, that the jump between Nightmare and Kata is like the jump between Easy and Nightmare. And some people could probably very much benefit from an in-between difficulty to get them up to the next level that they can't just make the leap to.
But that's almost like supposing that like somehow they don't have enough scaffolding to get good enough, right? But I don't think that's the case.
I know a number of people that they just get tunnel vision. They lose situational awareness
left
when the
in
crowd
there.
happens,
I
and they
believe
can't
you
keep track of where their
tougher than the
allies
others,
are, and they
wizard.
run out into the open middle area because they're chasing at a rat, or a rat runs around the side of them, and they just act like it no longer exists and get stabbed in the back from it.
I think did everyone here play Magic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I didn't.
So 3 for 4. But this is the type of person I want to describe. So I had a buddy who I've known since middle school, and we played Magic, and obviously JSET being JSET, he got way too serious about it, right? And he would play with me, but the thing is, he would always just make these goofy decisions, and he never seemed to get. He learned the game and he got pretty good, but he never ever got any better. And it's like he didn't even have a motivation to get better. And I always kind of dismissed him as like maybe he's just not capable or something like that, right? But looking back right now, I was totally like underestimating him. I was totally misunderstanding what was happening. It's just I just really think legitimately that he liked playing because he liked, he kind of liked the lore and he liked dropping the things. He liked playing the game. Like the game was good, but the primary motivation for him, I think, to this day, was goofing off with friends. And what does he do now? He plays, Pathfinder, like that D&D clone. I don't know what it's from. So he goes and he has got a group of guys around him that he put together a Pathfinder group, and he's very successful. He's a pharmacist, like he's a smart guy. So I completely, and I knew he was a smart guy at the time, but somehow every time I saw the way he was playing and the decisions he was making and his
Perhaps
lack
her
of
fire
progression,
burned too
I'm
bright.
like, are you an idiot? That was my feeling, right? But I think I was completely wrong, and you can still see that today. That there are plenty of people I've met and played with that I played with them as I was coming up, and they played a Nightmare, and to this day they play in Nightmare. And I don't think it's because they're not capable. I think it's because they don't want to.
Nightmare is, the difficulty level is such that you can be completely lackadaisical and chill and not necessarily pay too much attention, and it won't punish you for it.
Yeah, you
Exactly.
can be so sloppy and so aggressive.
Yeah,
I've played hundreds of hours of Nightmare with Adagar, but we didn't just play like, I don't know, we would be ludicrously aggressive to the point where pubs are screaming at us, like, what are you doing?
But you made a particular game out of it that was still a challenge, right? I'm
Yeah,
saying that these
we-
guys are playing a mode of difficulty or a type of difficulty that's below their capability of max challenge, right? They're not seeking max challenge.
Right, because I think for a lot of them, max challenge is more effort than they want to put into a game.
Yeah.
But it's like
Yeah, exactly.
my ex-wife and I used to play a lot of Scrabble back in the day. We'd go to like IHOP and play Scrabble for a couple hours after work while eating. And it worked out great because I wanted to win and she wanted to put down long words. So she'd put down like a 6 or 7 letter word that was worth like 13 points because it was a crappy scoring word. But it satisfied her to make the board big. And then, I'd put down 1 letter and get 54 points, or I'd build a block of 5x5 letters in the corner of the board, and that was like super satisfying to me. So we were playing for completely different reasons, but it worked because we both received what gave us satisfaction out of the game, even though it was completely opposite of what the other person was doing.
So going back to the Timmy, Johnny, Spike satisfactions, that sounds kind of like a very Timmy thing to do, right?
Yeah.
There's just something cool about dropping a long word. So, okay, this is kind of interesting, though, because it sounds like you managed to get your satisfaction somewhat while playing with her, but that's kind of weird to me, because was it ever a challenge?
Oh, that wasn't the point. My point was to see if I could get a higher score than the last time.
Ah, so you were playing solitaire
in like
with
a
someone
two-player
else.
game. And can I clear 300 or whatever my goal was at the time? And she wasn't terrible, so there'd be, at the early stage of the game, there'd be some back and forth of getting similar scores, but then
At some point, she'd make decisions that weren't around score maximization.
right, or you get a bad draw for one hand and you can't min-max your way out of it to get an acceptable play, so you just play something to dump your letters and you score 6 points. Well, the game's over.
So what's the analogy here for pub play, then?
I think it goes back to the people that they don't want to play something hard. They want to have a good time killing rats without being in any significant danger of actually losing. Because I think for a lot of people in that mentality type, not getting the carrot at the end of the mission because you died is severely dissatisfying.
So what's the analogy back for you, then? So someone who likes to perform, right? But playing in something that's below your max capability.
Yeah, I'll pull random weapon combinations out, or I'll change. Like, I play with people who they'll use the exact same loadout for each of the 4 characters, and they'll never use anything different. And then here I am, every map I switch up my weapon combinations to have variety.
So is what you're doing essentially making a challenge for yourself?
Not necessarily. I think I'm fairly well split between the high achievement side of things and the chill hanging out with people side of things.
Same.
Much less, or more so than I used to be when I was younger and doing like 5 years worth of raiding in EverQuest 2 and EverQuest 1 before that. It was totally boring and unsatisfying to just hang out. And maybe it does go back to I work from home now as opposed to working in a corporate office with 2,000 people.
So you get a need met that you wouldn't have needed to get met otherwise.
Right.
I don't know. So what else? Another one, using the magic analogy, is Spike. Or not Spike. I think we can talk about Spike pretty easily, but Johnny is the next one, right? So Johnny likes to show... I think it's like to demonstrate that he can do something cool. Does that make sense? It's like...
I guess on Vermintide it would be something like using a crazy weapon trade combination that you just came up with, like no healing on melee weapon and I don't know, just crazy stuff that no one else uses.
Do we know people like that?
And yeah, I guess I can be myself like that, but it's not what I do often. But there is a certain satisfaction in inventing something that feels crazy and in making it work. But after I do make it work, I usually not come back to it at all.
So
and I go back to the meta stuff.
Was it one of the first things that you did? Was this kind of exploration one of the first things you did, or is it something you've done in the late game after you've done everything else 100 times?
So it was certainly something that I've done when I got bored with the game and I was looking for new ways to find meaning in the game, because I also had a similar story where I started out without any of my older friends. I couldn't get them interested in Vermintide. They all said, "No, this is not something that I will be interested in." And I found a static group to progress through Cataclysm by joining public groups. Although it wasn't a complete group, I only had 2 guys that I constantly play with, and we always had a fourth random player. And so after we progressed through the Cataclysm with them, we got from a point where, oh my god, Cataclysm is now impossible, to, oh my god, Cataclysm is too boring. So eventually the other guys stopped playing. They only came back after each major game update.
Yeah,
And I
for
stayed
3
because
days.
I really loved the mechanics. So I was looking into ways to make the game interesting for me. So it's then that I started experimenting.
So it wasn't like a first interest. It was something that you stumbled upon later as a way to keep motivation, to find
Yeah,
more fun,
exactly.
to find the fun in the game. It wasn't the fun that jumped out at you, though. The challenge was perhaps the fun that jumped out at you. Panda, would you
Yeah.
say you're similar? That I know
Similar
you've
in
done a
what
lot of
regard?
that you've done a lot of
Reach
exploring
along.
and like making random things work, but it wasn't like one of the first things you did. It was something you did like late in the game after
Right.
you've done
These
everything else a million
arrows.
times.
Yeah, very much
They'll
so.
have
The
to
beginning
do.
of the game was just trying to tackle the game on Kata, really, because I didn't have any friends. Well, my real life friends that convinced me to purchase the game initially, they didn't have an attitude that was conducive to completion of Cataclysm. Because I was like, try to improve their positioning and stuff like that. I'd be like, well, we should be here instead of there. You're overextending. And they'd be like, oh, it's just Nightmare, dude. And then when we'd go to play Kata, they'd do the same kind of things. And
Keep moving,
they couldn't ever they just didn't have the motivation to be serious enough to play Cataclysm. So initially it was just me grinding. I did Nightmare really quickly with them, but then I wanted to do Kata, and it took me like a month of grinding in pubs. There wasn't any videos to look at the time of people playing Kata.
Was this January?
This is yeah, somewhere around there, January or February maybe.
There were a
I
couple.
think. I started in December. I didn't look, to be honest, but yeah, it was a huge grind to just beat Kata, and I just played all day, just only attempting to do the few maps that I had left on Kata. Like Wheaton Shaft was a disgusting one to go for.
Early
Lots
on, that
of,
was a hard map.
It's extremely
Yeah,
difficult
it was
to do
bad.
in pubs, because everybody just goes off and does their own thing, and there's no cohesion or plan. And if you try to take control, then you get the saltiness out of people who are like, oh, like, shut up, you don't tell me what to do, I know what I'm talking about. So
You mad, bro?
it was yeah, the beginning of the game was all just the grind to get the game on Kata, so I could tell my real life friends, like, I got my Kata banner. But also as an achievement for me, of course, more than just telling them what I did. But it was, after completion of Kata, then yeah, we started to do other things. I met Adagar and Ponyboy Curtis, and we did the speed
I remember
farming.
Ponyboy.
You know Ponyboy Curtis?
Yeah.
I don't think anybody knows Ponyboy Curtis besides
Pretty knows everyone.
you and me.
That's because I
He's
pub
been
all the
gone a
time.
long time. Yeah, and then we're doing silly stuff like friggin' Adagar and Ponyboy Curtis are like, they've got 2 downed bots on the double bridges over there, and they're just spamming. What is that trait called?
Yeah, distraction.
Distraction on the bots. Like 20 waves. Yeah. Yeah. Goofy stuff like that. That was definitely a late game thing.
So, I think one of the things we can take away from this is, even though all 4 of us, it sounds like, with some minor exceptions. So hold on, we had more than one motivation for continuing to play, but a big one for all of us was the game mechanically felt good to us. Would you say it's true?
Yep.
Yeah, I know the game mechanically is is
Needs
fantastic.
to be the case in any game I
It's
play. Personally.
it's very unique because it's very simple, but yet it's very deep at the same time.
Yeah.
So there is very little, a limited amount of moves you can do, but the things you can do with them are basically unlimited.
Yeah, simple and deep is a good explanation, good summary of the game mechanics.
Although in some ways it's kind of complicated. Like it appears simple on surface, but some mechanics are really complicated. Like the target count of each weapon, then different damage values for different targets you hit. This is really complex stuff, and I think it could be made easier maybe, and more natural to understand. Because when I just started playing, and even when I was progressing through Keta, there was no information, no technical information available at all, no spreadsheet, no nothing. I completed half of Cataclysm before I knew that there was a block revive, and I think even before I knew that you could about target limits. Well, I felt intuitively that about that there is a target limit or something, about that some weapons were good against dense hordes and some weapons were useless against dense hordes, but because I didn't have any precise knowledge, it was holding me back, and it was holding me back a lot. Now that I look back at it, understand it. So I think Vermintide 2 might I don't know, benefit from either being easier in the first place, or either from explaining the complex stuff better for the players.
I think the latter is the key here, because one of the things to take away from the somewhat similar experience that the four of us had is we had some primary motivations, and one of them definitely was Kata as an objective, right? And what does
Yeah.
Kata as an objective mean? It means there's something to aim for, something that was hard, that was required you personally to improve to get there. That was sexy. So I think you need to retain that. But I absolutely agree that the level of information given about the mechanics was abysmal in this game, and it took us forever to learn this game.
Oh yeah, I remember doing Hornamagus, finding out that the lake on the left side, as you come out, you could jump into and die and take 0 damage. So, but since damage you did to yourself counted for your damage dealt total, that was
Yes.
an excellent spot to go
Yeah.
take a weapon, go swing at one thing, go jump and die, and then write down what the damage of the weapon did.
Yeah, I did those tests
And I
myself.
did
back in the
so
day.
much of that.
What the hell?
Yeah, I absolutely remember those posts.
Also, there are certain things in the game that could only be learned through data mining. That couldn't be learned through natural experimentation, and I think it's not a very good thing for a game.
Yeah, that's very true. There's a lot of that stuff too.
I can't remember how many hours. Again, Pyromancer and I must have spent like 15 hours or something experimenting over a 2-week period to figure out how special callouts worked.
I do remember that video.
Yeah. I remember having a really good sense of how that worked, but
And
the
being a little
effort
bit
that you
wrong.
guys put into that was, and being a little bit wrong. And the effort you guys put into that was great. Like, I had come to the conclusion that it was the person who was the closest who always called out about it, but then the line of sight trigger on some of them threw that into the mix.
Yes, and cones versus spheres for
Right.
hearing and see. Like it turned out to be extremely complicated, which is
No, and it's a great. And that's one of the things that gives the game such great feel is the character callouts to each other, which is unfortunately one of the things that's severely lacking in Death on the Reich.
yeah.
The
Eh,
events
the
would
Baldur's
just
Gate
be
2
so
feel.
much better if those two major events in each of the missions had player banter or hero banter going back and forth.
Get those little legs pumping.
I need to go. I need
Alright,
to go
dude.
to work. All right, my friends.
Thanks
it
for
was a
hanging out.
pleasure.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
hanging out.
I think we'll wrap it up pretty soon.
Ashes to ashes.
So the other thing, okay, one of the things that we really enjoyed, the mechanics felt good. The other thing we've enjoyed is knowing something that's somewhat difficult to understand all the details of and being able to execute it flawlessly, whether it be mechanically or So, for example, once you really know how callouts work, you can start getting significantly more information. Right?
Right. And you know you're doing it right if people accuse you of cheating because you've played the maps well enough that you know where the specials usually come from, and as soon as a call out happens, you announce
Also,
where it is
yeah.
and you turn and you kill it. And
I
then you
think
get accused of using what I guess there's a highlight cheat for VMF that just displays where specials are.
Yeah, I also wanted to say that after watching JSET's video on the specials, I thought that, well, FedShark obviously wanted us to know that, well, they made special callouts for hearing and sight, right? So can you hear that? A gas threat. Watch that woman hook and stuff. So, but it wasn't obvious to me, and I don't think it was obvious to anyone. So
It wasn't obvious to
FedShark
anyone.
wanted to communicate to us that there was sight and hearing cues, but I guess that didn't work out so well.
It was too obscure.
Yeah.
And I will say this for as
I mean, it
great-
makes perfect sense in retrospect.
Yeah,
but all
exactly.
that there really needed to be was a thing on one of the loading screens of the tip of like an overhead of, like say, Carillion's model, and a sphere around and on a cone line of sight thing, saying that you can hear and see specials or something.
So
Yeah, or something like pay attention to the wording of those callouts. Well,
at some point, Fat Shark should have realized that a lot of the ways they were communicating with us were not good enough and been more aggressive.
Yeah, I mean, this is their first really successful game, so I'm sure they had a bit of a learning curve, and I'm sure there was staffing ramp up stuff.
But it's been time, right? And
Yeah.
same with balance. But let's put those topics for another time, because I wanted to come back to another thing. So all of us came in with certain types of motivations, and we've all been playing for an absurd amount of time, right? And in order to keep playing, at some point we all had a moment where we were discouraged because our primary motivation was getting harder and harder to tap, right? And at that point we kind of had a choice, which was to quit or to branch out and start trying to get pleasure from something a little bit outside of our first love. Or mod.
Yeah,
mod's been the other answer, but go ahead.
Yeah, so that's when that's where mods and True Solo and other types of self-imposed challenges come in.
So, in other words, we've all become a lot of people that want to stick with the game because it tickles their inner spike, right? For some reason, they want to be really good at this game. For whatever reason, it appeals to them, right? But at some point...
there is a certain euphoria just from the feeling that you know that you are good and you became better and you are doing things that felt impossible to you before, and now you are doing them easily.
But with any single-player game, there's a ceiling to that. Unless you have either community tools or you start making your own challenges. I think it's... Now, for Counter-Strike, it's different, right? Because if you, let's say Quake Duels, because it's easier, or StarCraft 1-on-1 or something. Right?
Any PvP game, for PvP games, there's no skill ceiling because
the other guy gets good
is too. There's always something that's better than you.
As long as there are other people who take
someone.
the game, as they take the game seriously, right? So if the game's basically dead, you could literally be the only good player in the game left, right? So in Quake World, Quake 1, for example, there actually still is competition, but I don't know if that's actually the case for Unreal Tournament anymore. But anyways, that's kind of an obscure discussion. But what I was getting at more like is, with a single-player game, I think there's a lot of great reasons to really like single-player games we didn't really get into, but we can do it another time. But at some point, you're going to get to the end of whatever regimented sets of difficulty they have, and then you have to figure out a way to make the game your own. You have to transition from being a Spike, someone who enjoys being dominant at the obvious things in front of them, to being a Johnny, someone who likes to come up with their own stuff. Like, you have to get more creative. So that's a transition, and it was a hard transition to make for me, at least. It was hard enough that I actually quit and had to come back later when there was nothing else I liked doing. So I guess it's one other thing we could talk about is we can talk about our friends list, and we all know people of the various types we talked about, do we know people that were very much spikes that really liked winning and such, but burned out and moved on because they couldn't make this transition? And what would you say to them?
Well, I don't think I have many such people on my friend list, and I don't think, to be honest, I don't think there are people who are 100% spikes.
Absolutely not.
I think most of us are both, because in some games I play to win, and in some games I play to have fun and to do something creative. I don't think I have to be one or the other, or anyone has.
Absolutely do not have to, but I absolutely do think it's the case. I'm speaking for myself here, that I was very much motivated by the challenge, and when I ran out of obvious challenges, I felt like I ran out of Vermintide to play. Do you not know people like this? I know so many people that got Catapult burned out and quit. And now they play
For
other
me,
games.
I think it's that I have a lousy memory, so I probably knew them and forgot because they moved on a long time ago.
Yeah,
And
same here.
because the majority, well, almost the exclusiveness of my friends list was people who I played with more than once on Vermintide. So I don't know that I ended up with very many people with the spike mentality on my friends list because they didn't stick around. They're the kind of people that pick up the game, mow through the achievements, and then they've consumed the game and now they're moving on to another one. That's kind of the crowd that wants all of the weapons and everything to be obtainable within 20 hours of gameplay.
I don't know. It starts getting difficult with terminology because it's not something I'd associate that with that. But maybe you're right. Maybe obvious motivators.
Well, and I think that the magic list it needs more variables. I think it's a broad categories of the 3 types.
Yes. We can ask ourselves. I just thought this would be a good way to kick it off. I guess the final thing I wanted to talk about for just a minute or two is what could Fat Shark do with Vermintide 2 to and this is somewhat shifting the conversation, so we can pick it up another time, but what could they do? There's different types of things that appeal to different people, yada yada, but as a single person or even a multi-person PvE game, there is a ceiling, or at least there seems to be a ceiling. What can they do to encourage people to move from just whatever their primary motivator is to finding more ways to have fun?
That's a good question because I don't know if it's something that they can actually achieve. Because some people you just can't make them be different.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
unless
to be
you
honest,
add
I think
more,
you can't make someone enjoy playing for the challenge or for other stuff. It's natural for most people, I think. The developers can help people discover ways that they want to play, but they can't make them want things, I think.
I think what they can do is they can recognize what those broad categories are and what those driving forces are, and have different aspects of the game seek to satisfy those for as long as possible. But like I would say that 100% of the people that I know that have played Vermintide for a long time frame, all of them would rate high on the achievement-oriented category.
Yep.
Because they're receiving satisfaction from accomplishment and not satisfaction from being handed loot.
Well, a lot of casual players that find Vermintide leave Vermintide after like 8 to 20 hours. They all say the same thing. I don't see any point in playing Cataclysm because I just don't see any point. You can play Nightmare and get all the same loot, and I also don't see any point playing other maps than Horn of Magnus. So for people, for me and my friends, there was never such a problem. We all wanted to progress through Nightmare and then progress through Cataclysm, and we all resented playing one map over and over again. So I don't think the devs need to help people such as us to find fun in the game. They just need to, I don't know, market the game better so that more people try it. What I think they need is to make it more interesting to casual players without making them, without trying to make them hardcore players. If you know what I mean. So
and like Quests and Contracts somewhat did that.
Yeah,
it took
that's
people
what we
that
wanted.
only play Horn Magus.
Exactly.
We
If-
asked
if-
for that. Remember that?
Yeah.
We asked for that as a solution to this problem. One of the links
Yeah.
that I put up on the Discord today is a link to the old feedback from like the first month or two of 2016. And everyone was asking, there needs to be a reason. What are they asking for? It's the same thing Malakar is talking about right now. There needs to be a reason to play something other than Horn on Nightmare. They're talking about extrinsics. But go ahead, continue.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say, and not doing a good job of it so far, is that I don't think you can make a person become a tryhard if they are not a tryhard, and it's okay. You don't have to. The vast majority of players are casuals that only play for like have fun with their friends. After a few beers, slaying rats for the feel of a hammer smashing through the horde of rats and getting shiny new gear.
And only playing for a single
yeah,
game
and
for
they
a couple
will
hours
never
and moving on to another
they will
game.
never want to progress through Cataclysm, which is excruciatingly hard. They will never want to overcome challenges and to improve and to suffer. They don't want that, and we don't have to make them. We shouldn't make them do that. We
So-
just need to give them what they want, and what they want is more shiny loot, more goofy stuff to do, more fun for the casual players.
So,
So-
I thought, no, I don't think what you're suggesting is Warframe this game and try to infinitely scale.
No, Warframe is the game that appeals, that's trying to appeal
To that player.
first and foremost to those players,
Yes.
right?
But
I
what you
think
want is
Vermintide-
enough.
Yeah,
You want
Yeah.
there to be enough so that they feel like they got their money's worth
exactly.
and had fun.
exactly. If you look through Steam stats, which people brought out on the forums a lot, that SteamDB or whatever the site is, you can see that average playtime for Vermintide players is like 4 hours or something, or 8 hours, and median playtime is even less. So that the vast majority of people
Try the
try it,
game
play,
and quit.
yeah, play for just a few hours and then quit.
Well,
So-
like it
Go ahead.
just floors me that one of the achievements for participating killing a rat ogre is not even achieved by 70% of the players.
yeah.
Meaning they really never even played a whole map.
Right.
So, but those Steam stats, they include people that like got the game and never even turned it on and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
that includes people
I
that
was
got
I
a
was
Humble
I
Bundle
was
and never
comparing,
installed it.
yeah, I was comparing it to other games like Dark Souls. Dark Souls is a pretty hardcore game, and yet its average and median playing times were much higher as far as I remember.
But I wonder how much of that is distorted by how expensive Dark Souls has always been.
Oh, well,
Right, I'm
that's
sure the
certainly a
numbers
factor.
plummeted.
I don't think they did so many cheap sales as Vermintide did and Humble Bundles.
But okay, so I think what I'm getting from you is the first thing is you're not trying to make the game exclusively how do we keep and retain hardcore players. There has to be enough there to, keep it fun for everyone, and I think that's true even if you're trying to keep hardcore players, because there has to be a reason that they want to play from hour 1 to hour 2, hour 2 to hour 3.
Yep.
No
Well,
one. I
like-
think none of us are trying to say get rid of that. I think.
No, but like take for like a reference back to MMOs like WoW and EQ2 and all of those games where there were the ultra hardcore super elite players, and they were this tiny niche of the game.
0.3% of the game or something or less.
But they were absolutely vital to keeping the casual players in the game, because the casual players who were there for wanting to be able to see the shiny loot derived a huge amount of satisfaction from seeing people just totally decked out in all this high-end raid gear and having the desire to have that too. And so
Yep.
without those high-end raiders, the attention span of the casual group drops off of a cliff. And especially with expansions allowing previously completely unobtainable content to then trickle down to the casuals who were like, well, yeah, I won't get to, do XYZ raid now, but in an expansion or two, once the level limit's up, I can go enjoy it then.
Ah, okay. So one of the things that happens in those games is inflation.
Right.
Is power creep.
Yeah, so a 70 level raid zone that is hard when you're 70 is a cakewalk when you're 80. And so you can drag casuals through them because the raid zone level doesn't go up. But
so one thing is inflation or power creep, enabling people to keep pushing. Another thing I heard you say, though, that I think is pretty important, is when this game was young, there were very few indications. As soon as kata was no longer a thing, right? Like several percent of the hardcore players achieved it. There was no next thing to say, "Look what I did."
Yeah, but I mean,
is that what you're getting at?
There's pros and cons to the whole loot treadmill thing.
Yeah,
and that's one of the pros of it. But another aspect that I never played WoW, so I don't know, but I assume it did at some point. But EQ2 had you could decorate your guild hall. I didn't care about that at all, but there were people that having the right look was hugely important to them.
But it's very expensive as a developer to make that kind of thing, and there's no way Fat Shark's doing that.
Well,
I mean,
they already have hats.
They could have, they could have little collectible things that you can find randomly in the different levels, and that you could trade and be able to, make your inn look personalized to you. And I knew a number of people that got huge amounts of satisfaction out of just having their place look great, and they'd redecorate it or whatever. And I knew a couple of the super high-end guilds had people who their job was to decorate their guild hall. They weren't good enough to actually participate on the raids, but they got to come in and get loot because they were fulfilling their job of making sure that the top-end guild's raid hall looks fucking fantastic when people come into it.
Well, that's interesting. There was no such thing in WoW. But there were also people who had jobs not having nothing to do with raiding, but who got to get loot because of the jobs they did.
Yeah, like I remember in EQ1, one of the things that would earn you DKP was to find raid targets, because that entire game had no instances. So all targets were able to be taken down by whoever got there first. So you'd have a team of rangers out tracking across through all the zones to see when the spawns were up, because they could spawn anywhere from 5 to 12 days apart, and marshal the troops to come over there, and they wouldn't even be there at that fight because they didn't need anything from it. They'd be off looking for something else for the raid to kill. One of the guilds I was in raided 24/7. They'd have like 200 to 300 people on at a time in multiple raids, just going over to try to find all the contestables and kill them before some other guild did.
Okay, so come back to Vermintide here, because obviously they're not going to build an MMO infrastructure, right?
No,
it's not a thing. What's transferable?
They could have like inns that are decoratable, with item pieces that you can either craft or drop in game or whatever, and the ability to have a market for people to exchange those in order to satisfy collector urges. That's what I was looking for earlier. Some people really are
that's strong
collector direction, and that promotes strong buying. It promotes desire to come back into the game and keep in it long after a lot of other urges may have been satisfied,
like the silly fun one,
right?
Yeah, I think any system that lets people collect cosmetic stuff, and it will be very good for motivating casual players to stay, and for player retention.
So
it can be hats or in decorations or skins or weapon decorations. For me personally, weapon skins would be the best thing possible for this game.
Yeah. How does it need? What should it be tied to? Should it be tied to specific accomplishments, Should be tied to grinding out tokens? Should be tied to RNGesus boxes?
Well,
I would say
Personally-
all of the
personally,
above.
Yeah, there might be some skins that that you get rewarded for, like for completing the Cataclysm or completing DLC missions. Some should be random, so
Some should be
maybe
tied.
some.
You get it during
yeah.
this window of time, and that's it.
So, is there a way to link the collector urge? I think what you were hinting at before is there's a way to connect the hardcore urge and the collector urge in a way that's synergistic. Is that what you're getting at?
Or
Yeah,
or at
I
least
guess.
along
Although
similar lines.
this might create a problem where people who are not interested in Kata will try to get other people to carry them through Cataclysm just to get that cosmetic reward they want.
Is that
Even
horrible?
maybe pay them money.
Is that
I
a
don't know.
horrible thing?
There was a lot of
them getting
there's-
bored and quitting.
Is that a
there was a
horrible
lot
thing?
of
Like,
such
let's say there's a
thing-
heroic deed, like a hard heroic deed, like Storm
Yeah.
Vermin mutation on Kata as a heroic deed. And as it, you have a chance of getting, or you do in fact get some cosmetic. You can't get it any other way. Do we think it's a terrible thing if players are encouraged to try to find people to play with, to play at a high level in order to get the thing? Isn't that just like leading them to water? Oh, you're going to have to learn
Yeah.
how to play as a team at a better level if you want to get this cosmetic. Oh, by the way, did you notice you had fun doing that? Like, there's
Well,
synergy there, isn't there?
It,
Well,
it can
and you
can be a good thing, but it also has its drawbacks because
True. The same way it already has its drawbacks with Kata.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, anytime a 2-key mission is up, you get, wow, I haven't seen a level 17 joining Kata in a while.
Which
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't care about because
Yeah, I don't care either. But it's just interesting that you play Kata all day, you get levels 3, 4, 6, 800 joining your game, but as soon as you're on the 2-key mission, you've got level 20s and 30s joining your game.
Yeah, it's crazy how much loot incentive, which is what I always call it, but collector urge might be a good thing too. Motivates.
Well, I would distinguish collector and loot. Loot
interesting.
is stuff that has a direct impact on gameplay, and collector is stuff that doesn't necessarily. Like, you might have a collection of, well, I want to have all the white weapons for everybody. That doesn't have any impact on gameplay. But you might also have a collection of, I want to have, one of each or two of each of the red weapons, or whatever, and those might have an impact on gameplay if you use them.
So-
well, there is still no clear line between them because in Vermintide 1, lots of people say that they want to collect all red weapons, and while red weapons are things that give players power, a lot of players treat them as collector's items. So it can be both a
Yeah.
power item and a collector item.
Oh my god, no, not the ear destruction guns.
Sorry.
So I think we could have literally a whole conversation. I think, first of all, Fat Shark did a pretty terrible job managing loot incentive. This is my take on this, and I've had somewhat candid conversations with some of the devs way back, that loot was like something they added. Does that make sense? Like, it was this basically
and they
is a
started
sword
with
and
a-
sorcery Left 4 Dead clone.
Yeah, they started with a framework of Left 4 Dead, and then they tacked on some stuff.
And I think they completely misjudged and underestimated how important loot is as an incentive in a game, right? Once you put loot in, it's going to very much change how people take and go your game. So if you're going to add it, you can't just add it. You can't release the game before you release some of the stuff that makes loot more forgiving, right? And to me,
And if you're going to add,
Go ahead.
it's like adding an economy, but not taking any
Yeah.
safeguards in to prevent scamming and duping of gear
Right.
or loading of gear.
if you're going to
and-
do the one, you have to do the other, or you're going to
Right.
screw yourself. And if you look back to the old comments from when the game was young, all the way till today, and I did a big post on the PC Gaming subreddit when the game was on sale a couple months ago when V2 was just announced, and like a couple hundred responses or something. And there were so many people saying there wasn't enough to do, or the loot system sucked. Like, that was like the dominant response. So
Yeah.
I think what we need to do is we need to have a conversation, just a follow-up conversation, just about loot incentive and how to maximize it for Vermintide. Because that seems like
it's a tricky topic though because of how Vermintide loot works. You can't make better and better weapons the way they do in Diablo style games because it will completely break Vermintide. So
yes.
it's not that easy.
So
Right,
infinite
and-
power progression is anathema to this game.
Right, and you can't have things that end up causing the gameplay to be trivialized because then you're as good as your loot is and not as good as your skill is.
So that's the other thing. I think there's two separate conversations, and we can try to merge them. But one of them is what can we do to better capitalize and make people feel happy about the loot experience of this game, even if they're 30-hour, like 5-hour casuals, 30-hour casuals, right? That's one. So they don't go away with a bad taste in their mouth. Does that make sense? And then
Yeah.
two is I think the soul of this game has to remain that this is an action game where you level up, not your character. That's the soul of this game. And I think one of the things, who was saying this, I think Malakar was saying this, is they need to do a better job marketing that. Once you have an RPG game that has any RPG elements in Sword and Sorcery, what does everyone think it is? They think it's an RPG. And then you get here and there's no power up for loot, or the loot power up is minimal. Like one of the things they already said they're going
I
to do.
can't even get new spells.
One of the things they said is the orange weapons aren't going to do any more damage than the white weapons, or whatever they're going to be in V2. Like, I think they're already thinking to themselves, how do we try to signal to players that this is a skill-based game? And I want to have a second conversation, a separate conversation where we talk about that issue in particular. How do we make this obvious this is a skill-based game, and that being really good in this game is cool in and of itself? Like, being good is a skill, like being good at Quake. Like, what a frag movie does for Quake, something needs to be done for Vermintide. Because
I think
so
it's
few
I think it's
still
more for
control it.
marketing. It's more of a marketing job than game design. It's how the Steam store page, what it says on the Steam store page, or what it says in the menus. At least it seems so to me.
Yeah, but a lot of times these days, and I mean, I know I do this too. If there's a game that I'm curious about that I don't really know anything about it, I go hit up YouTube and I look for some Let's Plays.
And that's what I've been
But
trying to do.
the Let's Plays for Vermintide were
Suck.
shit.
They suck, and all the
There's a
articles
bunch
sucked.
of people that actually absolutely suck at the game that
Yes.
they're playing on normal, and they're complaining about how awful the gameplay is because they haven't experienced any of it.
And they don't understand the game. It's
Right.
like, it's ridiculous. It's like asking, how someone who just a brand new player who's never really played Counter-Strike thinks of Counter-Strike. Like, what the hell does that have to do with anything? I want to buy a game based on a game I want to spend more than 10 hours on. I don't buy a game for 2 hours of experience. So why are the people who are setting the tone for what the game is people with less than 2 hours experience?
Because they have completely different goals. They're monetizing their Let's Play video for ad revenue. So they go and they collect every single game out there and they make another Let's Play video for all of them.
Then as viewers,
And
aren't we
they-
stupid to watch those videos?
Well, yeah, but viewers are stupid. And, it's one thing if there's only one person who's talking about it, but when there's 20 people of, 50 people with videos on it, you're not going to spend 20 hours weeding through to find the good one. You're going to look at a couple of them. And so I guess where I'm going with that is that the game really needs to give excellent first impression material. And so I think the only way it can do that is if it's going to satisfy a large draw of appeal. It's going to need to look fucking fantastic. It's going to need to feel good. It's going to need to have some difficulty feel to it from even in the basic levels. There's going to need to be some excitement, like more events. Like, could you imagine if the first thing that a person did in Vermintide was the river scene from River Reich? That's exciting. If it was all done well with good voice overlay, and the bugs were all fixed and everything. But the hook needs to come early to create this sense of excitement and thrill and, oh my god, this is amazing.
But you know that they can do more this time because they have a community that's shown how good this game is and can demonstrate it. I think they need to do more
I
to
think
capitalize on that.
Yeah, I think the existing community from V1 will really help the V2 launch, but I think especially if you were launching a brand new IP, that those are considerations that need to go into it that aren't made because it's a marketing perspective, but those kind of considerations need to go into the earlier stages of development of the game for it to be successful.
Okay, so this has been absurdly long as it is, so I don't know how I can possibly ask anyone to watch this whole thing on YouTube. So I think a lesson learned for me
Maybe we
is
should get just TLDR or something.
Yeah, this is what, like 90 minutes now?
Yeah, I don't even know how to summarize it because at the end we went so broad. We did do a little bit of a summary maybe 20 minutes ago, and then we branched off into other topics, which I should never have done, but I always want to. Okay, so I do think we have really excellent idea of what we want to talk about soon. And I think these talks can actually have implications for what does happen because we have ins with Fat Shark, right?
Right. I don't, like you said, I don't know if this would be worth putting up as a video, but it might be worth putting up as a source for some sort of summary for anybody who's actually interested in listening to us ramble.
Okay, so maybe I'll try to do that. Maybe I'll try to boil it down to something for 10 minutes and source this. That's not a bad idea. Long term, I was hoping to have these conversations be focused enough on a topic that we can have them be half an hour long and watchable as a podcast. 90 minutes of rambling is too much.
Now, we can do that. That probably takes having an agenda of what we're going to talk about going in and not figuring it out as we go along.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, internally I kind of had it, but I also wanted to see what the chemistry would be like, and it seems definitely good enough to do this again. I don't know, chat, what do you think? Was this good enough to do again, but maybe a little more focused so people don't have to sit here all day? We'll let them answer. What the heck is my other last on this? So, yes, I totally agree that this comes down to impression management, or whatever other word you want to use for that.
That's probably a good...
Yeah,
I think
like
this
it.
game is better mechanically than Dark Souls, in my opinion. Like, I think this, and somehow Dark Souls has this hardcore appeal, and I really want Vermintide to get to that appeal. And I'd love to hear ideas from anyone about what we can do, what we can help Fat Shark to do, what Fat Shark should do, etc., to change the public face of it. But at the same time, I totally agree with what Malakar is getting at, and I think you're both on the same thing, that the new player experience has to be tight and has to be really good. So it can't come at the expense of new player experience.
Yeah, I think just more and more as time goes on, people's attention spans are shorter and shorter. So you've got your first impression, and that's it for a lot of the potential base out there. And if the first impression is a turn off, they're going to drop the game and they're going to never consider it again.
Well, I don't think the gaming advertising industry, whatever they call themselves, what do they call themselves? The gaming journalism industry does any services to a game like this. I don't know who they do services to at all, really.
Whoever pays them the most.
Well, I don't know. I think I only watched Total Biscuits Let's Play of Vermintide, and I think it was pretty good.
Before you bought?
I don't remember if it was before or after I bought, but I think it was after I bought.
But let's
probably.
talk about the Vermintide 2 first impression videos that have been made so far. I do not think they make the game look good.
I watched the demo from the live stream, and I haven't actually gone out and looked at any of the impression videos from people that aren't familiar with the game.
Yeah.
Because I am familiar with the game, so I don't need to. But I think that's probably a good
Those
consideration.
videos, they show off how the game looks and how the combat feels, but they don't show the deepness of the mechanics, because like the guy just uses one attack, just spams one attack, and he isn't trying to dodge and to block and to minimize damage taken and stuff. So it doesn't show that the game has deep combat.
I don't know if it makes the combat look cool either, but maybe I'm wrong. But let's talk about some games. You have to be really good at the game, or at least you have to have, a pretty solid base of experience to appreciate how good someone's play is, right? The goodness of it, the depth of it, the stuff that's going on. Whereas other games like Quake, it is so obvious to see when somebody hits an amazing pop rocket and then pops them into the air and then blasts them in the face with a second rocket. Like, you don't need to know anything to know that was amazing and that was cool.
Exactly.
And I think Vermintide absolutely has some, wow, that shot was amazing appeal.
But you're right. It requires enough game knowledge to be able to appreciate it.
Or it requires the trappings associated with it. So what a lot of newer games that are coming out that are trying to be competitive or to appeal to a competitive crowd are doing is they put up tournaments before the game is even fully released, right? But what are they really trying to do? They're trying to give it the dressings. hype and the dressings of a game that have depth that are worth investing in. And I don't think Fat Shark has to go far to show that Vermintide 2 is going to have a lot of depth and interest. All they have to do is get good footage from the right people playing, and they're done. With maybe a couple little bit of dressings, like somebody who can speak better than me, like Yap, or something like that, describing what's going on, like two people doing a commentary.
Well, and I think what I would find exciting, and I don't know if I can speak for everyone, obviously, but what I would find exciting would be montages of clutch gameplay.
Oh
Not-
yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, not this, oh, we're playing on normal and there's no risk involved because we want to make sure that the people that are demoing the game
Don't die.
can get through the entire demo.
I think
But-
maybe a montage of spectacular deaths, of fails, of like people getting grabbed by two people getting grabbed by two assassins at the same time.
Right,
The game
I have a
engine. It
snippet
might,
saved of a rat ogre hitting me, and as I'm launched through the air, he
You get
hit
hit
me
by a Packmaster.
into a Packmaster. Yeah.
yeah.
And then an assassin lands on the other person that was trying to take over tanking the ogre, and then you died. You know,
So they need to
that
get
kinda
like 40 hours of high-level raw play and then go in and make some footage out of it.
yeah, with someone who's good at editing.
Yes, to make it look sexy.
Yeah, and it will also help drive the message that this is a hardcore game. So this is something like Dark Souls rather than something like Diablo.
Yes,
You know,
because you have to
I-
fight with
Come
the
to think
lore
of
of
it,
this game.
Dark Souls does it a lot. I think there were promotional videos for Dark Souls where you showing off all the different ways you could die in Dark Souls.
Yeah, that video totally was a hit.
It
I
was-
remember
and it
that
was
one
sexy?
strikes. It was sexy. I remember it's stuck in my mind for a long time
Hey,
afterwards.
If anyone has the link to that, would you put it in the chat or send it to me and I'll put it in the chat? Because I want to
I'll see if I can find it.
I want to give a look for it too. Okay, so I think one of the big takeaways here, though, is that there's stuff that Fat Shark can do, and they're not doing. And I don't see any indication that they're going to do it again, and they didn't do it the first time either.
That's probably a fair point.
Okay, so this has been a long time.
Yep.
So let's...
I really enjoyed it though.
Yeah, but let's definitely call it. Thank you so much for hanging out, guys.
Yeah. Thanks everyone.
So, in the future, we can just do unscripted chats like this randomly, which I think is fun, or we can do tighter stuff where we agree on what we're going to talk about ahead of time. So we don't have to decide right now. And
Yeah, I think probably doing a mix of both of them is probably worthwhile.
one is like a generative thing, and then the other one is kind of like a cumulative thing, or something to share in particular.
Or something like this to generate topics to revisit with a tighter focus.
Yeah. Okay. And I think we have two really tight focus conversations that we want to have. Loot more fun and rewarding for long term, and change how the game's perception could be altered or changed.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Okay. I'm gonna call it then.
Yeah. Okay, thank you guys.
Thanks.
Let's see. How we doing on time? Give me 1 second to get some water, guys. right. So, we have any weapon mod on, so we could play some really spicy memes. I was doing this earlier, which was quite fun, because Saltspire does not have a good regrowth weapon, so you can't do a scavenger weapon. But if you have a good scavenger weapon, you can play Repeater, and Repeater's pretty fun. So this is a pretty solid combo that you can't do normally right now. We did Pick. Now Pick's biggest weakness was pace, and Swiftbow is an incredible pace weapon, and it made Pick really fun. And then I did Great Axe on Kruber, because I hate being short. We did Great Axe handgun. Ordinary setup you could completely have on Dwarf, and it felt so much better on Soldier. And all of those will be going up on the YouTube this week, but they were all on yesterday's stream too. What do I have bound on mouse scroll? Mouse up is left click, mouse down is dodge. So what's left to try? I mean, there's a lot of things we can do. One of the goofy things I was doing was Dual Daggers Blunderbuss. Maybe we'll do that some more. Let me think, what else? What else is there? What other weaknesses are there that we can fix? So I think one of the cooler things is dual daggers or similar setup with Sienna, because so much of what's wrong with Sienna is you need mobility to make like great use of her AoE. And this is like letting me test what I wished the ceremonial dagger was. I did one-handed axe. It was okay. I think I'd much prefer it to be a do I want haste? I think I'd much prefer fireball to be, or to this ceremonial dagger to be dual daggers, basically. Glaive is already so good, though. It doesn't really have any weaknesses to pick up. So if you guys have any ideas, let me know. Let me start just playing something randomly in the meantime.
They say that for every all
Garden sounds fun. Castle's always fun. Oh, I did not change characters. It's okay, I'm too
we
cold.
have a
Let me
bit
get
of a
sweatshirt.
situation, friends. The rats have taken a serious interest in Castle Drachenfels, and a grey wizard I know believes they're well on their way to snatching a powerful artifact from the bowels of that evil keep. You must go there and beat them to it.
Calvin Hobbes? I don't like rapier, though.